Welcome to the deep dive.
Oh,
Today,
yeah.
we're going way back in time,
Way back.
26 centuries to be exact, to ancient Greece,
All right.
to explore the world according to a thinker named Anaximander.
A fascinating figure.
Is he?
Especially when you consider that he lived in a time when most people believed the Earth was a flat disk,
Whoa, that's wild.
possibly resting on giant turtles or pillars.
Okay, I have to admit, the giant turtle theory
Right.
is kind of
Is
charming.
it a good one?
But are we saying this Anaximander guy figured out the Earth was a sphere way back then?
Not quite a sphere.
Okay,
But he did propose something radical for his time, that the Earth floats in space without falling.
interesting.
No turtles needed.
So no turtles.
Our guide for this deep dive is Carlo Rovelli's book, Anaximander.
Right.
He paints a vivid picture of this ancient thinker and his groundbreaking ideas.
Let's dive in. So it's the 6th century BCE.
Okay.
No smartphones.
Nope.
No internet.
None of that.
Knowledge is mostly confined to royal courts and steeped in myths.
Right.
But then we have this Greek city, Miletus,
Yeah, Miletus.
which seems to be a hotbed of new ideas.
Miletus was unique.
What made it so special?
A bustling port city, a crossroads of trade and culture.
I see. So kind of a melting pot.
Exactly. This independent spirit fostered critical thinking and a thirst for knowledge.
So very different from the royal courts.
Oh, yeah, completely different. Setting the stage for a new way of understanding the world.
Fascinating.
Unlike the Babylonian astronomers who meticulously gathered celestial data
Really?
to connect events in the sky with earthly affairs like wars or floods.
So they thought the stars controlled what happened here on Earth.
Basically.
The thinkers of Miletus were searching for something more. It's interesting how that misconception that events in space directly influence our daily lives
Right.
is still surprisingly common today.
It really is.
It's crazy to think about.
And speaking of Babylonians,
Yeah, the Babylonians.
did you know that King Nabonassar's reign,
King Nabonassar.
starting in 747 BCE, was so significant in astronomical records that even Ptolemy, centuries later, used it as year zero for his calculations.
Wow, that's a fun fact to impress my friends with.
There you go.
So, back to Anaximander.
Back to Anaximander.
He emerges from this vibrant city of Miletus.
That's right.
How does his background differ from, say, the scribes toiling away in the royal courts of powerful empires?
Well, Anaximander wasn't bound by the rigid traditions of the court.
Oh.
He was free to think, to question, to challenge the status quo.
See.
And challenge he did.
Oh, he did.
Sadly, his book on nature is lost to us.
What? The whole thing?
All we have is a single fragment, a tantalizing glimpse into his revolutionary ideas.
That's like trying to piece together a puzzle with only one piece.
It is, isn't it?
It makes him even more intriguing.
Right?
But before we delve into those ideas,
Yeah.
I have to ask about Anaximander's teacher, Thales.
Okay, Thales.
Rovelli mentions an anecdote about Thales predicting a solar eclipse, possibly using knowledge gleaned from his travels to Babylon.
Possibly.
It makes you wonder how much Babylonian knowledge influenced these early Greek thinkers.
It's a question that scholars still debate.
Yeah, I can see why.
But regardless of the influence, what sets Anaximander apart is how he took those influences and forged something entirely new.
Okay, enough teasing.
All right.
Give us the highlights of those revolutionary ideas.
Okay, so
What made Anaximander such a giant in Rovelli's eyes?
imagine a world where everyone thinks the sky is a dome above the earth.
Okay, I'm imagining it.
Anaximander says, nope, the heavens actually continue beneath our feet too.
Wow, that's bold.
He also believed the sun, moon, and stars were not gods, but wheels of fire at varying distances from Earth.
Wait, hold on. He's talking about different distances in space.
He is.
That's incredible for his time.
Absolutely. But there's more.
More.
Anaximander believed all things originated from and eventually returned to a boundless, undefined primordial substance he called the apeiron.
The appear.
And get this, he believed life began in the sea and evolved onto land.
Okay, my mind is officially blown.
Is it?
He's touching upon ideas that wouldn't gain traction for centuries, like evolution.
You're right.
Did people think he was completely out of his mind back then?
Remember, this was a time when gods were seen as the explanation for everything.
Yeah, the gods controlled everything.
But Anaximander was looking for natural causes.
Natural causes.
Rain, not a god crying.
What?
It's seawater evaporating, carried by winds, and then falling back down.
Interesting.
Thunder and lightning, not the wrath of Zeus, but the result of winds bursting from clouds.
It's like he's inventing science as we know it.
In a way, he is.
It's a complete paradigm shift.
It really is.
But what about this apparent concept?
The apparent.
It sounds pretty abstract and out there.
It is. Imagine you're Anaximander trying to explain where everything in the universe comes from.
Okay.
You can't just say water or fire, because what created those?
Right, it's like what came before that?
The apeiron is his answer. The ultimate source, the building block of reality itself.
The building block of reality itself.
It's a mind-blowing concept that even foreshadows ideas we're exploring in modern physics.
So it's like the ultimate building block of the universe.
Yeah.
Kind of like how in modern physics we have things like quarks.
Exactly.
Oh,
And that's what makes studying Anaximander so rewarding.
I see.
You see glimpses of ideas that resonate with modern science,
Yeah.
even though he was working with very different tools and knowledge.
Speaking of tools, the book talks about how the Greek alphabet itself
Right.
played a huge role in spreading knowledge.
Huge.
Seems like a side note, but it's actually quite fascinating.
It's a crucial point.
Oh,
Okay, tell me more. Before alphabets, writing systems were incredibly complex.
I've heard that.
Only a select few, like scribes and royal courts, could read and write.
I can imagine.
Imagine trying to learn hundreds of symbols just to communicate basic ideas,
No thanks.
right?
So how did the Greek alphabet change the game?
They adapted the Phoenician alphabet,
Yeah.
but they had a stroke of genius.
Genius.
They used the leftover symbols to represent vowels. This simple change revolutionized literacy.
Literacy.
Suddenly, reading and writing become much easier to learn.
That makes sense.
Knowledge could spread more widely,
Well-
and you get this explosion of philosophical and scientific thought.
Wow, just from changing the alphabet.
Yeah, pretty amazing.
I'm sensing a pattern here.
Oh, yeah.
Independent city-states,
Uh-huh.
an accessible writing system,
Right.
open debate. It sounds like the perfect recipe for scientific breakthroughs.
And you know what else was emerging in Ionia at the same time?
What's that?
Democracy.
Get out!
Yeah.
So, we're talking about ancient Greece, the birthplace of democracy and scientific thinking.
You got it.
Is there a connection there?
Rovelli certainly thinks so.
He does.
Both democracy and science rely on open debate and critical analysis. They reject the absolute authority of kings and priests. In fact, Miletus had something resembling a parliament, one of the first in the world.
Wow, talk about a historical coincidence.
It is.
It makes you wonder if those early forms of democratic governance played a role in fostering this spirit of inquiry that Anaximander embodies.
It's a fascinating question to ponder.
It is.
But before we get too carried away with the political parallels,
Okay.
we should probably address a key question.
Which is?
What does science even mean in the context of Anaximander?
That's a great point.
He wasn't exactly wearing a lab coat and conducting experiments.
That's a
right?
great point. He is working in a very different intellectual landscape.
Totally.
So how do we reconcile his approach with our modern understanding of science?
It's a complex question. In the 19th century, the prevailing view was that science was about discovering absolute unchanging truths about the world.
Okay.
But the 20th century,
Yeah.
with the likes of Einstein and Heisenberg,
Einstein and Heisenberg.
threw a wrench in that neat picture.
You're talking about the revolutions in physics
Yeah.
that shattered those old certainties, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Einstein's theory of relativity and Heisenberg's uncertainty principle showed us that even our most cherished scientific theories, like Newton's laws of motion,
Yeah, Newton's laws of motion.
they could be incomplete or in need of refinement.
So if science is always evolving, always being revised,
Right.
why should we trust it? That thought can trigger a bit of an existential crisis.
It's a valid question.
Yeah.
But the beauty of science lies in its constant evolution.
Okay.
It's not about clinging to dogma,
Right.
but about continuously seeking better explanations for how the world works.
I see.
And that brings us back to Anaximander.
Let's bring it back to Anaximander.
Okay.
But how can we compare this guy from ancient Greece to giants like Einstein?
Wow.
They seem worlds apart.
It's not about specific discoveries. It's about their approach.
Their approach.
Anaximander dared to imagine a world understandable without gods,
Wow.
a world governed by natural laws.
Okay.
And that's the very foundation of scientific inquiry, even today.
I see. So it's about that fundamental shift in thinking,
Yeah,
that willingness to question what seems unquestionable.
exactly.
It's like upgrading from an old, clunky operating system to something more dynamic and adaptable.
I like that analogy.
And speaking of operating systems,
Hmm.
this brings us to a fascinating aspect of the book,
Okay.
the exploration of the relationship between science and religion.
Science and religion.
How did Anaximander's radical naturalism challenge religious thinking?
Right.
And how does that tension continue to play out today?
It's the ultimate clash of worldviews, right?
Yeah, that's a big one.
And it's still a hot topic today.
It really is.
What's interesting is that Rovelli doesn't advocate for abandoning religion altogether.
So he's not saying get rid of religion.
He's more focused on recognizing the limitations of religious explanations when it comes to understanding the natural world.
That makes sense.
Absolutely.
And he delves into some intriguing theories about the historical evolution of religious thought.
Oh, yeah.
Have you ever heard of Julian Jaynes and his concept of the bicameral mind?
The bicameral mind.
Vaguely.
Okay.
It rings a bell,
Yeah.
but I could definitely use a refresher.
Well, Jaynes argues that the very idea of gods might have emerged as a way for early humans to cope with increasingly complex societies.
Complex societies.
Imagine early humans living in small, tight-knit groups.
Okay, small groups.
Decision-making is relatively simple,
Right.
face-to-face.
Everyone knows each other.
But as societies grow larger and more complex,
Things get complicated.
you need new ways to maintain order
I see.
and make sense of the world.
And that's where the gods come in,
Exactly.
to provide a framework for understanding and social cohesion.
Precisely.
Wow.
Jaynes suggests that what we perceive as the voice of God might have been an internalized set of social rules and norms. Okay, internalized rules.
It's not that people were literally hearing voices,
Right.
but more that they lack the kind of complex self-awareness we have today.
Yeah.
These internalized rules manifested as commands from a higher authority,
So they thought it was God telling them what to do.
a divine voice guiding their actions.
So it's like the gods say, I should do this, therefore I must.
Yeah.
It's a way of maintaining social order in a world that's becoming increasingly difficult to comprehend.
Exactly. And it worked for a while.
For a while.
But around the first millennium BCE,
Okay, first millennium BCE.
things start to change.
Like that.
Empires rise and fall, trade expands, cultures clash.
So lots of upheaval.
The world becomes more chaotic and unpredictable.
And those old clear-cut divine instructions aren't so clear-cut anymore.
Right. Jaynes calls this the breakdown of the bicameral mind.
Breakdown of the bicameral mind.
The gods become more distant. People have to start making more complex decisions on their own.
They have to figure things out for themselves. And that's when we see the emergence of philosophy.
Philosophy.
And eventually what we would recognize as scientific inquiry.
So the rise of science is intertwined with the decline of the gods.
It's a compelling idea.
Yeah.
It's not a simple linear progression, though.
Okay.
The book also discusses the work of Marcel Gauchet,
Marcel Gauchet.
who offers a different perspective on this disenchantment of the world.
Okay, I'm all ears.
All right.
Give me the Gauchet rundown.
Gauchet argues that religion was once all-encompassing.
All-encompassing.
It provided a framework for understanding everything,
Everything.
from the material world
Okay.
to social structures and political power. It was like the original operating system for human society.
I like that analogy.
Huh.
But how does Gauchet explain the shift away from this all-encompassing religious worldview?
He suggests that monotheism,
Okay. Well,
rather than being an advancement,
Mm-hmm.
is actually a sign that religion's grip on society is weakening.
Religion's grip is weakening.
In early polytheistic religions,
Okay, polytheistic religion.
you have all these different gods tied to specific places and tribes.
Right.
It's a very localized, contextual form of religious belief.
Right. You have your local neighborhood god you make offerings to for a good harvest.
Exactly.
Very immediate and transactional.
Exactly. But then empires come along.
Empires.
They unify diverse populations under a single ruler.
So one ruler, one god.
And suddenly the idea of a single all-powerful God starts to make more sense.
So monotheism is basically a reflection of centralized political power.
That's Gauchet's argument.
It's fascinating how these shifts in religious beliefs mirror broader social and political changes.
It is.
And Gauchet points out that this shift to monotheism wasn't always smooth sailing.
It wasn't.
The book mentions the example of Akhenaten,
Akhenaten.
an Egyptian pharaoh who tried to impose the worship of a single god, Aten.
Right, Aten.
It didn't end well for him.
No, it didn't.
Priests don't tend to like it when you mess with their gods or their power structure.
It's a classic power struggle.
It is.
But what's really interesting is how Gaucher positions the Israelites in this narrative.
Okay, the Israelites.
He suggests that it was this group living on the margins of these vast empires
On the margin.
who truly embraced the concept of monotheism
Really?
and turned it into a powerful force.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Gaucher argues that Moses,
Okay, Moses.
by promoting the worship of a single universal God,
A single universal God.
who is distinct from any earthly ruler,
Okay.
was essentially flipping the script.
Up in the script.
It was a way of challenging the power of the empires
I see.
while also providing a unifying force for his people.
So a brilliant move.
It's a brilliant strategy, both politically and theologically.
Yeah.
But how does this all tie back to the development of science? It seems like a bit of a leap. Think about it.
Okay.
The idea that there are universal laws governing the world,
Universal law.
laws that can be discovered and understood through observation and reason. That's a pretty radical departure from a worldview where everything is controlled by the whims of gods.
It's a shift from divine will to natural law.
Right.
It's like humanity is realizing that there's an underlying order to the universe,
Yeah,
an order that can be deciphered and understood through observation and critical thinking.
precisely.
And that's where Anaximander's legacy shines.
Yes.
He was one of the first to challenge those ultimate sacred postulates,
The ultimate sacred postulate.
those unquestioned truths that form the bedrock of any culture.
That's right.
Hold on, you're going to have to remind me what those ultimate sacred postulates are.
Okay.
Sounds important, but I'm a little fuzzy on the details.
Think of it like this.
Okay.
Every culture has certain beliefs or assumptions
Uh-huh.
that are taken as absolute truths.
Okay.
No questions asked.
No questions asked.
They're the foundation on which everything else is built.
The foundation.
For example, why is murder considered wrong?
Why is murder wrong?
It's not just about laws.
Right, it's deeper than that.
It's something deeper.
Okay.
A shared moral understanding that's woven into the fabric of our society.
So these ultimate sacred postulates are like the unwritten rules of the game.
Yes,
The things we take for granted as being true and right.
that's it.
And Anaximander dared to question these fundamental assumptions.
Yes. And Rovelli brings in another fascinating perspective
Okay.
in these fundamental assumptions and how they shape our reality.
Okay.
The work of anthropologist Roy Rappaport.
Roy Rappaport.
Rappaport argues that ritual,
Rich.
not just belief,
All right.
lies at the heart of religious experience
Hmm.
and might have even played a crucial role in the development of language itself.
Okay, that sounds intriguing.
Yeah.
I'm a sucker for origin stories. How does ritual fit into the picture?
Think about it like this.
Okay.
Language doesn't just describe reality,
Yeah,
it actually shapes it.
it shapes it.
When a judge pronounces someone guilty,
Okay, when a judge says guilty,
they're not just stating a fact.
right, they're creating a new reality for that person.
A new reality.
They're invoking a whole system of laws, punishments, and social consequences
Okay.
that are based on our shared understanding of justice and accountability.
Wow, that's a powerful way to think about language.
Yeah,
It's not just words.
No.
It's an active force that shapes our world.
exactly.
Okay.
And Rappaport argues that ritual is the key to making this whole system work.
Ritual.
Rituals are formalized actions grounded in what he calls those ultimate sacred postulates. They give weight and legitimacy to these pronouncements,
Okay.
these acts of linguistic creation.
Can you give me a concrete example of how this works?
Yeah.
I'm trying to wrap my head around it.
Think about something as fundamental as property rights.
Property rights. Why do we respect them?
Why do we respect them?
Ultimately, it goes back to a whole chain of pronouncements, rituals, and legal frameworks that establish those rights.
Okay.
From the signing of deeds to the swearing of oaths in a courtroom.
Right, all those rituals.
These rituals reinforce our shared belief in the concept of ownership.
So it's like, I own this piece of land because a deed says so, and the deed is valid because of all these legal and social structures that we've built up over time through countless rituals and pronouncements that reinforce our belief in these concepts.
Exactly.
Wow, that's a lot to unpack.
Those structures are ultimately grounded in these shared rituals and beliefs. They give shape and meaning to our world.
That's deep. But how does all this tie back to Anaximander and the birth of scientific thinking?
What Anaximander and other early Greek thinkers were doing was essentially questioning those ultimate sacred postulates.
Questioning the ultimate sacred postulate.
They were looking for explanations that didn't rely on unquestionable truths or the authority of tradition or the gods.
Right.
They were, in a sense, hacking the operating system of their culture.
Hacking the operating system.
Searching for a different code.
Okay.
A different way to understand reality.
And that's the essence of science, isn't it?
It is.
That willingness to question, to probe, to challenge the accepted truths, even those that seem most fundamental.
Absolutely.
And that's why Anaximander's legacy is so enduring.
It is.
He wasn't just coming up with specific scientific theories.
No.
He was laying the groundwork for a whole new way of thinking about the world.
That's right.
A way of thinking that continues to shape our lives today.
It's amazing how these ideas from 26 centuries ago can still feel so relevant and thought-provoking.
It is.
I'm starting to see the world through a whole new lens. That's the power of engaging with these ancient thinkers.
Yeah.
They challenge us to step outside our own limited perspectives and consider new possibilities.
I'm eager to hear how Rovelli ties all these threads together.
Yeah.
What's the final takeaway from this deep dive into Anaximander's world?
Well, Rovelli emphasizes that one of Anaximander's greatest contributions is the concept of scientific progress. He wasn't afraid to be wrong.
To be wrong.
To constantly revise and refine his understanding of the world.
That seems counterintuitive. Wouldn't being wrong discredit his ideas?
Well,
Why would that be seen as a positive thing?
because it reflects a willingness to learn and adapt. Anaximander understood that knowledge is not static. It's a journey of exploration and discovery.
A journey.
And sometimes that journey involves taking wrong turns, making mistakes, and revising our maps as we go.
It's like he's saying, don't be afraid to get lost.
Exactly.
Embrace the uncertainty. That's where the real learning happens.
Exactly. And that brings us to one of the biggest misconceptions about science.
Okay.
The idea that it's about finding absolute unchanging truths.
Yeah, that whole science has all the answers trope.
Right.
We've seen how that can lead to some pretty rigid and dogmatic thinking,
Yeah.
both in science and in other areas of life.
Absolutely. Rovelli argues that science is more like a constantly evolving map.
A map.
It's the best guide we have for navigating the world. But it's never perfect or complete.
It's always changing.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
The beauty of science lies in its willingness to acknowledge uncertainty,
Uncertainty.
to embrace the possibility of being wrong,
Okay.
and to constantly seek better explanations.
It's like we're all explorers charting unknown territories.
Yeah, I like that.
And even if our maps are flawed,
Right.
they still help us make sense of the world and find our way.
I love that analogy.
It captures the spirit of scientific inquiry beautifully.
It does.
And that spirit of inquiry, that
Yeah.
thirst for knowledge and understanding,
Right.
is at the heart of Anaximander's legacy.
It is.
Okay, but I still have one nagging question.
Okay.
If science is always changing, why should we trust it? It can feel a bit like shifting sands.
Because that constant questioning and revising is precisely what makes science so reliable.
Really?
Think about it.
Okay.
If you cling to an idea that's been proven wrong, you're not going to make much progress.
Right.
But if you're willing to acknowledge your mistakes and adapt your understanding,
Adapt your understanding.
you're much more likely to arrive at a more accurate and useful model of reality.
So it's not about blind faith in science,
No.
but rather a trust in the process,
Yeah.
the method, the constant striving for a better understanding.
Exactly. And I think that's one of the most valuable lessons we can take away from Anaximander. He didn't have all the answers.
He didn't,
And he didn't pretend to.
but he dared to ask questions,
That's right.
to challenge the accepted wisdom of his time,
Yeah.
and to seek explanations that were grounded in observation and reason.
Absolutely.
And that's a legacy worth celebrating.
It is.
I think I'm starting to grasp the significance of his contribution.
Yeah.
It's not just about the specific ideas he put forth,
Right.
but about the way he approached the world. That spirit of critical inquiry that laid the groundwork for the scientific revolution.
And that revolution continues to this day. We're still grappling with the implications of his ideas,
Really?
still exploring the boundaries of knowledge. And pushing the limits of our understanding. Anaximander's legacy is a reminder that the universe is full of wonder and mystery.
Wonder and mystery.
And there's always more to learn.
It's a humbling thought, isn't it?
It is.
That even after all these centuries of scientific progress, we're still just scratching the surface of what there is to know about ourselves and the world around us.
Yeah.
And it brings us back to that enduring tension between science and religion.
Science and religion.
Where does Rovelli leave us on that front? Does he offer any resolution to this age-old debate?
He doesn't offer a simple solution.
No simple solution.
But I think he encourages us to embrace the complexity.
What's complexity?
There are those who see science and religion as fundamentally incompatible, and those who believe they can coexist peacefully.
Two very different views.
Rovelli doesn't take sides,
Okay.
but suggests that the tension itself is valuable.
The tension is valuable.
It forces us to grapple with profound questions about the nature of reality, the limits of knowledge, and the meaning of human existence.
So it's less about finding a definitive answer and more about the journey itself.
Yeah, I think so.
The ongoing process of asking questions, exploring different perspectives, and expanding our understanding of the world.
Exactly. And I think that's a very Anaximandrian perspective. After all, he wasn't afraid to challenge the prevailing worldview of his time.
Right.
To imagine a different way of understanding the universe.
A different way of understanding the universe.
And that spirit of inquiry, that willingness to look beyond the obvious, is what ultimately drives us forward.
Drives us forward.
Both individually and as a species.
Well said.
Oh.
I think it's safe to say that our deep dive into Anaximander's world has left us with more than just a few historical facts. It's challenged us to think differently about the nature of knowledge.
Right.
The role of science and religion in our lives, and the importance of constantly questioning and revising our understanding of the world.
Absolutely. And perhaps most importantly, it's reminded us that the universe is a vast and mysterious place.
Vast and mysterious.
Full of wonder and beauty.
Wonder and beauty.
And that the journey of exploration and discovery is never truly over.
On that note, I think it's time to wrap up this incredible journey through time, listeners.
Okay.
If you're as fascinated by Anaximander as we are, we highly recommend checking out Carlo Rovelli's book for a more in-depth exploration.
It's a good one.
It's a truly thought-provoking read. And if this deep dive has sparked your own curiosity about the world, keep exploring, keep asking questions.
Keep asking questions.
And never stop learning. After all, that's what Anaximander would have done.